Hello, welcome to the channel. If you enjoy this kind of historical storytelling, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.
How long can a child survive in total darkness before fear becomes louder than hope? What do you do when the way out vanishes, and the world above has no idea where you are? And how do you stay alive when the cave itself seems to be breathing against you? I did not know the answers then. I only knew that the cave had closed behind us. It was supposed to be simple. We had done it before. After practice, we rode our bikes, laughing, still muddy from the field, still feeling like kings of the afternoon. The cave was familiar, almost friendly. Cool air, wet stone, the echo of our voices bouncing back at us like a game. I remember the sound of dripping water. I remember the smell, earthy, heavy, like the cave was alive and watching us. But I wasn't afraid. None of us were. We were boys. Fear felt like something for adults. We walked deeper, our flashlights cutting thin lines through the dark. Shadows stretched and moved when we moved. Someone joked about ghosts. Someone else laughed too loudly. The cave swallowed the sound and gave it back quieter, smaller. Time inside a cave doesn't behave like time outside. Minutes stretch. Hours collapse. You stop knowing how long you've been there. You only know forward and back. Then the rain came. At first, it was just a sound. A distant roar, like wind trapped underground. We didn't understand it immediately. Caves don't show you the sky. They don't warn you. Water appears where there was none, rising without asking permission. I saw it at my feet first. A thin stream, clear and cold, sliding over stone. We stepped around it, still calm, still careless. But the stream grew teeth. It widened, deepened, moving faster, louder. The cave silence broke apart into rushing noise, water slamming against rock, echoing endlessly. Our joke stopped. Flashlights shook in our hands. Someone said we should go back. We turned around. And that was when we saw it. The path we had used, the narrow, familiar passage, was gone. Not blocked. Not hidden. Gone. Swallowed by water that surged like it had always owned the place. I remember standing there, staring, waiting for the water to move aside. Waiting for it to behave the way things usually do in the world outside. It didn't. The cave didn't care that we were children. It didn't care that we were scared. The water kept rising. We tried to move anyway, stepping into it, testing depth with shaking legs. The cold bit instantly, climbing past ankles, knees, thighs. The current pushed hard, stealing balance, stealing breath. Our coach told us to stop. His voice cut through the panic, steady, calm. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He made us listen. We couldn't go back. Not safely. Not at all. So we went forward instead. Deeper. That decision changed everything. The light from the cave entrance disappeared behind bends and stone. The air grew thicker. The temperature dropped. Every step felt heavier, slower, like the cave was pulling us in. We reached a higher chamber eventually. The ground rose above the waterline. We climbed onto rocks, breathing hard, soaked, shaking. For a moment, it felt like relief. But relief is dangerous when it arrives too early. We waited. Minutes passed. Then more. The water followed us. It crept across the stone floor, patient and unstoppable. The chamber shrank. Dry ground became damp. Damp became shallow pools. Our shoes soaked through. Our legs went numb. Flashlights dimmed. Batteries die quietly. There is no warning sound. One moment you have light, the next you don't. One by one, the beams weakened, flickered, and vanished. Darkness took their place. Not normal darkness. Cave darkness is complete. It presses against your eyes until they forget how to see. You can wave your hand in front of your face and feel nothing but emptiness. I sat down and hugged my knees. My teeth wouldn't stop chattering. I told myself it was just cold. I was lying. Fear settled in slowly, like water filling lungs. It didn't rush. It waited. Someone started crying. Someone else tried to joke again. The joke died halfway through the sentence. Our coach spoke to us in a low voice. He told us to save energy, to stay together, to breathe slowly. He reminded us that water doesn't rise forever. I wanted to believe him. But the cave kept breathing. Every sound felt amplified. Drips, splashes, our own breathing. Hunger crept in quietly, then loudly. We hadn't brought food. We hadn't planned to stay. Why would we? Outside, families were probably eating dinner. Homework was waiting. Normal life was continuing without us. Inside, time dissolved. I don't know how long passed before we accepted the truth. We were trapped. The water blocked every exit. The darkness hid every possibility. There was no signal.
No clock.
No way to know if anyone would come. I tried to imagine my parents' faces if they knew where I was. The thought twisted my chest. I pushed it away. Thinking about home made the cave feel smaller. So I thought about nothing instead. We lay on the rocks, bodies pressed close for warmth. Sometimes someone whispered. Sometimes no one spoke for a long time. The cave answered us with dripping water and silence. I began to understand something that night. Hope doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't crash through darkness like light. Hope is something you build quietly, piece by piece, when there is nothing else left. Our coach told us stories. He made us breathe together. He told us to imagine the cave as a place to survive, not escape yet. That word, yet, mattered. Because if we believed escape was impossible, the cave would win immediately. We drank water from the cave itself, cupping it carefully, trusting that it would not harm us. Hunger became a dull ache. Fear became a constant companion. Sleep came in fragments. When I closed my eyes, the darkness didn't change. When I opened them, it was the same. At some point, I stopped counting time. I only counted breaths. In, out. The cave held us in its grip, and somewhere far above, rain kept falling. We did not know if anyone was searching. We did not know if the cave would flood completely. We did not know if this place would become our end. But we were alive. And that had to be enough, for now. At some point, the darkness stopped feeling like an enemy. That realization scared me more than the darkness itself. The first day, or what I thought was the first day, inside the cave felt endless. Hunger came and went in waves. Fear surged and retreated. But by the time I realized that the darkness had not changed, that the cold had not lifted, something inside me began to adapt. I learned that the human body is quieter than fear wants you to believe. We moved as little as possible. Every step wasted warmth. Every unnecessary word wasted energy. Our coach reminded us gently, never sharply, that survival was not about strength but about patience. We drank water dripping from the cave walls. At first, I hesitated. It felt wrong, unsafe. But thirst is persuasive. The water was cold and metallic, tasting like stone, but it kept us alive. We rationed nothing because there was nothing to ration. Hunger did not scream. It whispered. It gnawed slowly, turning thoughts foggy, making time even harder to measure. My stomach stopped aching after a while, as if it gave up asking. The cave became our entire world. I began to recognize its sounds. I could tell the difference between water falling from a high ceiling and water crawling across rock. I learned where the ground dipped and where it rose. In the darkness, my hands became my eyes. Touch replaced sight. I felt the roughness of stone under my palms, the slick algae where water passed often, the warmth of another body pressed close in the cold. We slept huddled together, breathing in sync without meaning to. Our coach kept us talking, not constantly, but enough. He told us stories about his childhood, about temples and forests, about monks who trained their minds to endure discomfort. Sometimes he led us in breathing exercises, slow and steady, counting in the dark. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Those rhythms anchored us when thoughts drifted toward panic. There were moments when fear tried to take control. When someone imagined the water rising higher. When someone thought about oxygen running out. When someone whispered about never seeing daylight again. Each time, our coach brought us back to the present. We are here, he would say softly. And right now, we are alive. Right now became everything. The cave did not allow us to think in futures. It demanded attention to the immediate moment. Breath, warmth, stillness. I realized how loud the world outside must be. Inside the cave, there was nothing unnecessary.
No distractions.
No noise except what mattered. At times, I almost forgot the color of the sky. Memories of sunlight felt distant, unreal. like stories from another life. I tried to picture my home, my parents, my bike leaning against the wall. The images blurred, as if my mind refused to let them hurt me. Instead, I focused on faces beside me. We were no longer just teammates. We were a single unit, bound by circumstance. Age differences disappeared. Arguments vanished. Survival erased everything that didn't matter. When one of us felt weak, the others leaned closer. When someone shivered uncontrollably, we pressed in around him. Warmth was shared without question. Time passed strangely. Sometimes it felt like hours had disappeared between breaths. Other times, minutes stretched into something unbearable. Without light, sleep came in fragments. We drifted in and out, never fully resting, never fully awake. Dreams bled into reality. I dreamed of water rising even when it wasn't. I dreamed of voices calling my name from far away. When I woke, it took effort to remember where I was. There was a moment when despair came quietly. Not panic, not screaming fear, just a heavy thought settling into my chest. What if no one finds us? The cave was deep. The entrance was hidden. Rain had erased our tracks. We had not told anyone exactly where we were going. I didn't say the thought out loud. Some fears are contagious. Instead, I listened to the steady breathing around me. I reminded myself that adults were smart, that someone would notice we were missing. That time did not stop just because we were trapped. Outside, life continued. Inside, we waited. Then something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden noise, no light, no miracle. Just a subtle shift in the air. A faint movement that didn't belong to the cave itself. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But others felt it too. The water level, which had haunted us constantly, seemed to stabilize. It no longer crept higher. It moved, yes, but it did not advance. That small mercy gave us space to breathe. Hope returned, not as excitement, but as endurance. We began to believe not in rescue, but in survival. That distinction mattered. Rescue depended on others. Survival depended on us. If someone came, we would be ready. If they didn't, we would still hold on. The cave tested us, but it also taught us. It taught us that fear can be managed, that hunger can be endured, that darkness does not always mean death, and that humans, even children, are capable of far more than they imagine when they have no other choice. We did not know it then, but the hardest part was still ahead. The waiting. Because surviving in the dark is one thing. Being found, and what comes after, is another. Remember the moment I realized that the cave was changing. Not the rocks. Not the walls. The silence. At first, the silence had been heavy but steady, like a blanket thrown over our heads. After days, or maybe longer, I wasn't sure anymore, it began to move. It crept in and out with the sound of dripping water, the distant rumble of something shifting deep within the mountain. Sometimes it felt like the cave was breathing, slowly, patiently, as if it knew it could wait longer than we could. We had learned to sit very still. Coach told us to conserve energy. Your body is like a battery, he said softly. If you waste it, there will be nothing left when you need it most. So we Saturday. We lay down. We closed our eyes even when we weren't sleepy, just to pretend that time was passing faster. Hunger had become a dull ache, no longer sharp enough to make us complain. Thirst was worse. Our lips cracked. Our tongues felt thick and dry. Sometimes we collected drops of water from the cave walls, letting them fall slowly into our mouths, one by one, like counting seconds. We didn't talk much anymore. Talking made you remember. Remember your mother calling you in for dinner. Remember the sound of a ball hitting the goalpost. Remember the sky. One night, or what I thought was night, I heard someone crying. It wasn't loud. Just small sounds, like breath catching in a chest that couldn't hold it anymore. No one said his name. We didn't need to. We all knew. Coach moved closer to him in the dark. I couldn't see their faces, but I could hear Coach's voice, slow, calm, steady, like he was teaching us to stretch before practice. Breathe with me, Coach said. Slow, like this. And somehow, the crying stopped. Coach had become something more than a coach down there. He was our clock, our rulebook, our wall against fear. He told us stories about meditation, about monks who could sit still for hours, about how the mind could be trained just like muscles. When you feel afraid, he told us, look at it. Don't fight it. Just watch it pass. I tried. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. The worst moments were when we heard water. Not dripping. Moving. The sound came from far away at first, a low, distant rush. It echoed through the cave, bouncing off the walls until it felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. Then, we all knew what rain meant. Water levels rising. Passages flooding. The cave closing itself like a fist. Coach gathered us close and explained what we already understood. If the water came too fast, we would move higher. If it came faster than that, he didn't finish the sentence. No one asked him to. That was the night I truly thought we might disappear there. Not die, disappear. Like we had never existed. Then, something happened that didn't belong to the cave. A sound that was not water, not rock, not breath. A voice. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Hunger and darkness do strange things to your head. But then someone grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Did you hear that? He whispered. The voice came again, muffled, distant, but real. Human. Coach stood up so fast he hit his head on the rock above him, but he didn't make a sound. He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted back, his voice echoing wildly. We are here. Silence. Then, light. A thin beam cut through the darkness like something alive, moving slowly across the cave wall. I had forgotten what light looked like. It hurt my eyes. I blinked, tears streaming down my face without permission. Two figures appeared, emerging from the water like something unreal.
Divers.
I didn't know how to feel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry and run and hug them all at once. One of them spoke in English. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Relief. They counted us. Again and again, as if they couldn't believe it either. 13. All alive. Coach bowed to them, his hands pressed together. Even in that moment, he was calm. The divers told us we were not getting out yet. The cave was still too dangerous. The water was still too high. The path out was long and narrow and flooded. But they promised something else. They know you are here, one of them said slowly, using simple words. People, many people, are coming. When they left, the darkness returned, but it was different now. It was no longer empty. Hope had moved in. Food came next. Small packets, dropped carefully into our hands like treasures. The taste was strange, but it was the best thing I had ever eaten. Water followed. Clean. Cold. Real. The divers came and went. Each visit was short. Each goodbye felt heavier. We learned that the world above had changed. That our faces were everywhere. That people were praying for us. That the cave we were trapped in had become known across the world. I tried to imagine it. Millions of people thinking about a group of boys they had never met. It felt impossible. But the cave no longer felt infinite. Then came the part no one wanted to talk about. The way out. The divers explained it with their hands, with drawings in the dirt. Long underwater passages. Tight spaces. Darkness. Breathing through equipment we had never used before. One of them looked at us very seriously. Some parts, you cannot swim. You must trust. Trust. That word echoed in my head long after they left. I lay down on the cold stone and stared into the dark, imagining water filling my mouth, imagining losing the line that guided you, imagining not knowing which way was up. I was afraid. More afraid than I had been at any moment before. Coach sat beside me. You don't have to be brave, he said quietly. You just have to listen. I closed my eyes. Above us, the mountain waited. Around us, the cave held its breath. And somewhere beyond all of that, the world was preparing to pull us back into the light. But first, we would have to pass through the darkness one last time. Time stopped having meaning somewhere deep inside the cave. I don't know which day it was anymore. I only knew that the darkness had become familiar, like a second skin. At first, the dark was terrifying. It pressed against my eyes, against my thoughts. But after a while, it became quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the world had been paused, and we were the only ones left awake. The divers came back. That was how everything changed again. Their lights appeared first, small, trembling stars moving through water that looked solid from where I stood. When they reached us, I felt my chest loosen in a way I hadn't realized was tight. They spoke softly, slowly, like every word mattered. They smiled with their eyes. They told us we were not alone anymore. But they also told us something else. Getting out would not be easy. The cave was still flooding. The passages were narrow, twisting, filled with water so dark you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. Some parts were completely underwater. Some parts were barely wide enough for one person. Even the strongest divers had struggled to reach us. And we, children, would have to go through all of it. I remember looking at the water then. I had crossed it once before, when it was only ankle deep, laughing, racing my friends. Now it was something else entirely. It moved slowly, quietly, like it was thinking. They explained the plan as gently as they could. Each of us would be taken out one by one. We would be guided by expert divers. We would wear full face masks connected to oxygen. We would be tied with a line so we wouldn't drift away. We would have to stay calm, completely still, completely trusting. If we panicked underwater, things could go very wrong. I had never dived before. I barely knew how to swim properly. The idea of being underwater, unable to speak, unable to see, depending on strangers to breathe, it felt unreal. Like a story meant for someone else. But this was our story now. That night, our coach gathered us together. He spoke to us quietly, his voice steady even though I could see how tired he was. He told us fear was normal. That being afraid didn't mean we were weak. He reminded us to breathe slowly, to stay together, to trust the people who had come for us. He taught us to meditate again. We sat on the cold rock, water lapping around our feet, and closed our eyes. We listened to our breathing. Inhale, exhale. In the dark, breathing became the only thing that mattered. Not time, not hunger, just breath. I practiced imagining myself underwater. I imagined the mask on my face. I imagined the sound of my own breathing echoing inside it. I imagined staying calm, floating, letting someone else guide me. At first, my heart raced just thinking about it. But slowly, with every breath, it slowed. The divers began training us in small ways. They let us try the masks. The first time I put one on, it felt heavy, tight. The air sounded loud, mechanical. I wanted to rip it off. My body screamed that something was wrong. But they told me to look at them, to focus on their eyes, to breathe. I did. The panic didn't disappear, but it softened. They showed us how to lie still, how to keep our hands close, how to signal if something felt wrong. Everything was done slowly, carefully, like they were handling something fragile. Because we were. I remember one diver kneeling in front of me, his face half hidden behind the mask. He pointed to his chest, then to mine. He breathed slowly, exaggeratedly, so I could copy him. In that moment, I realized something. These people were risking their lives for us. They didn't know us. They didn't owe us anything. But they came anyway. Through darkness, through danger, through fear. That thought stayed with me. The waiting was the hardest part. We knew the rescue would start soon, but we didn't know when. Each sound made my heart jump. Each movement of water made me tense. We tried to keep our routines, meditating, resting, conserving energy, but anticipation filled every quiet space. One by one, my friends were chosen. The first boy stood up when his name was called. His face was pale, but he nodded. We hugged him. Not the loud kind of hug. The quiet kind, where you don't know what to say, so you just hold on. When he disappeared into the darkness with the divers, the cave felt emptier. Then another name. And another. Every time someone left, I felt two things at once. Relief that they had a chance to go home, and fear that something might go wrong. We waited in silence. Sometimes hours passed without news. Sometimes a diver returned, soaked and exhausted, to prepare for the next boy. Their faces told stories they didn't speak out loud. When my turn finally came, I felt strangely calm. Not brave. Not fearless. Just ready. They fitted the mask onto my face. Checked it again. And again. The straps were tight. The world narrowed to the sound of my breathing and the glow of a single light. A diver squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. We moved slowly into the water. The moment my body went under, every instinct screamed. My chest tightened. My mind filled with noise. But then I remembered the breathing. In, out, slow. The water was colder than I expected. It wrapped around me completely. I could see nothing but darkness and the faint glow of the diver's light ahead. I focused on that light. Time disappeared. There was no up or down. Only movement. Only breath. Sometimes I felt myself being guided gently through narrow spaces. My body tilted, turned. Sometimes I felt myself floating. I trusted. That was the hardest part, trusting without seeing. At one point, my mask bumped against rock. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. My hands twitched, but the diver squeezed my arm firmly, reassuringly. I breathed. The panic passed. It felt like hours. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Then, suddenly, the water felt different. Lighter. I felt myself rising. The mask was removed. Air hit my face. Real air. I coughed. I cried. I laughed, all at once. Lights surrounded me. Voices. Hands. Warmth. I was out. As they wrapped me in a blanket, I thought about the cave behind me. About my friends still inside. About the darkness that had held us for so long. I realized something then. We had survived not because we were fearless, but because we learned how to be calm in fear. And that lesson would stay with me forever. They didn't tell me when it was my turn. I think they knew that if they did, fear would have time to grow. So instead, everything happened quietly, almost gently, like the cave itself was holding its breath. A diver knelt in front of me. His eyes were calm behind the mask. He touched my shoulder once, not to push, not to pull, just to let me know he was there. I stood up. My legs felt strange, like they didn't fully belong to me anymore. Days of sitting in the dark had changed my body. My muscles were weak, but my mind was sharp in a way it had never been before. This was it. The cave that had been our world was about to let me go, or swallow me whole. They fitted the mask over my face. It smelled like plastic and metal. When I breathed in, the air came smoothly, unnaturally calm compared to the damp heaviness I had known for days. The sound of my breathing filled my head, loud and rhythmic, drowning out everything else. In, out, in, out. They told me not to fight the water, not to panic, not to think. I nodded. I don't know if I could have spoken even if I wanted to. The moment we entered the water, the cave changed. The air disappeared. The ceiling pressed closer. The walls narrowed until there was barely space for my shoulders. The light from the diver's torch cut through the darkness like a fragile promise. I was guided forward, my body floating, my mind clinging to the sound of my breath. At first, I tried to remember where we were, which tunnel this was, how far we had to go. Then I realized something important. Thinking was dangerous. So I stopped. I let myself become small. I let myself become weightless. The water was cold against my skin, even through the chute. It slid over my arms, my neck, my face. Somewhere, my body knew it should be afraid. Somewhere deep inside, something screamed that this was wrong, that humans were not meant to move like this, blind and silent in the dark. But the mask kept breathing for me, and the diver kept moving. Time disappeared. There was no before or after. Only motion. Only darkness. Only the steady pull forward. Sometimes I felt the rock scrape against my side. Sometimes my helmet brushed the ceiling. Once, my foot caught on something, and my heart jumped so hard I thought the mask might crack. The diver stopped immediately. A hand squeezed my arm. Still. Wait. I froze. The water around us felt thicker, heavier, like it was testing us. Then, slowly, we moved again. Forward. Always forward. I don't know how long it took. Minutes. Hours. A lifetime. At one point, the tunnel narrowed so much that I felt myself being pushed sideways, my body turning without my permission. I wanted to reach out, to grab something solid, but I remembered the rule. Do not fight. So I didn't. I let the cave take me. In the darkness, strange thoughts came and went. Memories of sunlight, of running on grass, of laughter that felt impossibly far away. I wondered, briefly, if this was how people disappeared, quietly, without drama, without sound. Then the diver squeezed my arm again. Light. Not just a torch this time, but something softer, wider. The water began to feel different. Less tight. Less angry. We surfaced in a chamber. I didn't realize I had been holding tension in my body until it released all at once. My chest rose and fell faster now, the breathing louder in my ears. Someone spoke, voices echoing strangely, distorted by helmets and stone. They adjusted the mask, checked my eyes, my hands, my face. I was still alive. But we weren't done. Again, they guided me under. Again, the darkness closed in. This part was worse. The tunnels twisted more. The ceiling dipped lower. The water pulled harder, as if the cave knew what we were trying to do and didn't want to let go. Once, the light disappeared completely. For a second, just a second, I was alone in total blackness. No up, no down, no sound but my breath. Something inside me cracked. I don't know if I moved or if I froze. I don't know if my heart stopped or raced. I only remember thinking, very clearly, very calmly, so this is how it ends. Then the light returned. The diver was there. Always there. I learned something in that moment. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep breathing even when fear fills every space inside you. When we finally reached a place where I could stand, where my feet touched ground and stayed there, I felt like I had crossed into another world. The air was colder here, fresher. The ceiling higher. The walls less cruel. People surrounded me. Hands everywhere. Voices overlapping. They wrapped me in blankets, sat me down, checked me again and again as if afraid I might disappear if they looked away. I wanted to speak. I didn't know what to say. So I just breathed. They moved me forward again, through passages that felt almost wide after what we had passed. I could hear rain somewhere above us now. Real rain. Falling from the sky I hadn't seen in days. Then, suddenly, there was no ceiling. The world opened. Light exploded into my eyes. Not the gentle glow of a torch, but raw, blinding daylight. I squinted, tears streaming down my face, unsure if they came from the light or from something breaking open inside me. I was outside. I didn't understand it at first. My brain lagged behind my body, still expecting stone, water, darkness. The air smelled different, clean, alive. It filled my lungs in a way that felt almost painful. People were everywhere. I saw colors. Red, blue, yellow. I heard shouting, crying, laughter. I felt hands on my shoulders, my back, my arms. Someone wrapped me in another blanket, thicker this time. I tried to stand. My legs shook violently. I had to sit. The sky above me was impossibly blue. I stared at it, unable to look away, as if afraid it might vanish if I blinked. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a child who had been returned to the world by force. As they carried me toward the waiting ambulance, I looked back once. The cave entrance was just a dark mouth in the rock now. Quiet. Ordinary. Almost harmless. No one looking at it would ever guess what it had taken from us, or what it had given back. I was the first of us to leave. The others were still inside. And for the first time since the rescue began, I was on the outside, waiting. I waited outside longer than I expected. Wrapped in blankets, sitting on cold ground, I watched the cave breathe people out one by one. Each time a diver appeared at the entrance, time seemed to stop. Everyone leaned forward. Every face held the same silent question. Alive? Each time the answer was yes, the world exhaled. I counted without meaning to. Not with numbers, but with faces. With names. With memories of voices in the dark. When another one of my teammates emerged, pale and shaking but breathing, something inside me loosened. But relief never came all at once. It arrived in fragments. An arm around my shoulders. A warm drink pressed into my hands. A familiar voice calling my name. The rain kept falling. It soaked the ground, turned everything into mud, reminded us how close we had been to losing everything. Every drop felt like a warning that the cave could still change its mind. When the last boy was brought out, the noise broke free. People cried openly now. Some fell to their knees. Others hugged strangers without saying a word. I saw grown men cover their faces with their hands, shaking. Then our coach came out. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, like the cave had taken a part of him and never given it back. But when he saw us, all of us, his eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. He bowed his head, not to the cameras, to the divers, to the people who had gone into the dark for us. I don't remember being taken to the hospital. I remember flashes, bright lights, hands checking my eyes, a bed that felt too soft, silence that was louder than the cave. When I woke up, the ceiling above me was white and clean. The air smelled sharp, unfamiliar. Machines hummed quietly around me, keeping watch. I raised my hand and watched it move. It felt like a miracle. Doctors came and went. They spoke softly, explaining things I didn't fully understand. They said my body was weak but healing. They said my mind might take longer. They were right. At night, the cave returned. I would wake suddenly, heart racing, certain that water was rising, that the ceiling was lowering. My hands searched for rock that wasn't there. Sometimes I reached for my teammates, forgetting that we were no longer lying side by side in the dark. The nurses told me it was normal. "Your body survived," one of them said gently. "Your mind is catching up." During the days, the world came to us. People we didn't know. People from far away. They smiled, bowed, cried, thanked us for surviving as if it was something we had done for them. Cameras followed us everywhere. They called us brave. They called us heroes. I didn't feel brave. I felt like someone who had learned how small he was. One afternoon, they told us about the diver, the one who didn't come back. His name was spoken carefully, with respect. They told us how he had been bringing air tanks into the cave, how he had collapsed underwater, how they tried to save him, how they couldn't. The room went very quiet. I stared at my hands, at the way they trembled slightly when I thought about breathing, about how something so simple could disappear so easily. He had gone into the cave knowing he might die. I had gone in looking for adventure. That difference stayed with me. When I was finally allowed to leave the hospital, the sky felt enormous. I had never noticed how wide it was before, how much space there was to breathe. My family held me as if they were afraid I might slip through their arms. My mother cried without sound. My father said my name over and over, like a prayer. At home, nothing had changed, and everything had. My room was the same. My shoes were still by the door. My school books lay where I had left them. But I was not the same boy who had walked into the cave. I noticed silence now. I noticed the sound of my own breathing when the house was quiet. I noticed shadows in corners, how darkness could feel heavy or harmless depending on what you remembered. For a long time, I avoided small spaces. I avoided swimming. I avoided anything that reminded me of being trapped. But slowly, with time, fear loosened its grip. I talked to my teammates. We didn't always talk about the cave. Sometimes we talked about football, about school, about nothing at all. Just being together mattered. We understood each other without explanation. Years later, people still ask me what it was like inside the cave. They expect terror. They expect panic. I tell them the truth. It was dark. It was quiet. And in that darkness, we learned how to trust. We trusted our coach when he told us to stay calm. We trusted each other when fear crept in. We trusted strangers whose faces we could barely see, whose voices we barely understood, who held our lives in their hands. The cave taught me something I carry with me still. Survival is not about being the strongest. It is about staying calm when the world narrows. It is about breathing when everything tells you not to. It is about believing that somewhere, beyond the dark, there are people who will come for you. Sometimes, late at night, I still remember the sound of water moving through stone. But it no longer scares me. It reminds me that I made it out. That we all did. And that once, in the deepest darkness I have ever known, the world came together to bring a group of boys back into the light.